Hello and welcome to the Google Plus Developer Office Hours. I'm Gus Class, a developer advocate for the Google Plus platform, and I specialize in the publisher features such as the +1 button, share, and now the history API. Joining me is Jonathan. He's on my team and is also a developer advocate. Jonathan, want to give a little intro?
Hey everybody, Jonathan Barry here. I'm the Google Plus developer advocate for Hangouts.
Awesome. So today, Jonathan will be talking a little bit about the Google Plus Hangout apps, and specifically, he'll be talking about using the Google Wallet API for payments within Hangout apps. This is real exciting because it introduces a lot of new scenarios for people who are interested in accepting payments from Hangouts. So, Jonathan, want to get going with it?
Yeah, sure. So for those who don't know about the Google Commerce APIs and specifically payments, Google provides a really easy to use e-commerce API to allow you to accept payments inside your web apps. And it's competitively priced, probably one of the best in the industry. But the key thing about it is it's really easy to use. And by really easy to use, I mean I had no idea how to use it, and I got it working within an afternoon. I actually just used the public documentation, and I was able to accept payments within my Hangout app, which is really awesome. So I'm going to start a screen share to walk you through a few things. Let's switch over. Now you should be seeing my screen. Is that, Gus, can you see it?
Yeah, I can see it. Also, Jonathan, I want to remind anyone who's watching to ask any questions that you have within the event, and we'll try to get to them as we go along.
Great. So the homepage for the Google Wallet is developers.google.com/commerce, and there's the Digital Goods API, which was formerly known as the In-App Payments API, and that allows you to accept payments within your application. Now, all it really requires you to do is to learn a little bit of technology, which is I'll go over in a bit, and a simple JavaScript API. The piece that you just got to learn is a thing called JOT. It's an acronym for JSON Web Tokens, and it's just an encryption algorithm for transporting secure JSON over the wire. The fortunate thing is there's already libraries in pretty much every programming language out there, so it was really easy for me to get up and running, and just using the sample application that came with the developer site that's hosted there, I was able to integrate that pretty quickly. So let me just talk a short, brief minute about what JSON Web Tokens are by going through the documentation. As it loads. So a JSON Web Token is really an encrypted JSON file. And the pieces to the JSON Web Token are some timestamp information, like when it's issued, the expiration date, and then the actual items you're trying to sell. What makes it a token or encrypted is your seller ID and the seller secret that Google gives to you, and then the library that you choose to use wraps it up, and then you just call a simple JavaScript API. And on this page, you'll see the actual method is payments.inapp.buy, and you pass in the JOT, and you start the purchase flow, and it's really that easy. Now, what I wanted to do, switching back to camera, I wanted to make a very simple application that allows me to buy something inside of a Hangout. So to simplify all that, I wrote a simple app engine project based off of the sample project that whittles it down to just an AJAX service. And I'm going to walk through the AJAX service. But the neat thing about the AJAX service is I just pass in the name, the description, the price in the URL to that AJAX request, and it creates a purchase. This is really good for debugging and testing. Probably not something you want to use in production. So switching to the actual code. Can you see that okay, Gus?
Jonathan, you may want to actually make the font a little bit bigger for the people looking, because I'm having trouble actually maximizing this video for the full screen. But
how about now? Is that
it
better?
Looks a lot better for me.
Okay, great. So for anybody who's not used Python with App Engine before, this is a Python project. It's very simple. The two things that you'll notice at the top is we are importing this the JOT library, and we're also importing from the seller info file my seller ID and seller secret. I'm not going to show that to you because then people can start taking money for me. But there's a URL that we'll have in the show notes that helps you generate your own seller ID and seller secret. But outside of that, the process is really easy. I have this route, this AJAX JOT route, that creates a timestamp, assigns some default values for the name, price, and description, and then encodes that information into a JSON web token. And you can see it's just standard JSON with my seller secret, which sort of tokenizes it. And then I just do a response.out.write, basically returning that JSON web token to the AJAX request. A minor nit here, I'm adding CORS headers. That allows me to do cross-domain requests in most modern browsers, and it works pretty reliably. And that's in case you want to do something like a gadget-based Hangout app versus an iframe-based gadget app. Anyway, those are little addendums.
So Jonathan, just to clarify, so those CORS headers are used specifically for the scenario because you're using cross-domain scripting on here.
Yeah, exactly. We have a sample application that shows you how to serve your Hangout from your own iframe. So if you do that, if you want to do AJAX from same domain to same domain, works no problem even in legacy browsers. If you're going to do something like a cross-domain in a pure JavaScript environment, because it's being hosted by Google, different domain from where your AJAX is being hosted.
Yep. So basically, this is just AJAX being called from within an iframe.
Exactly.
Cool.
You know, I could have not done this with AJAX. I could have done it as a pure server-side application, which is probably the right way to do it in many scenarios. And this is just for demonstration purposes and sort of flexibility.
Great, thanks.
Now, let's see, what was the next thing I wanted to show? Yes, so now actually using that, let me switch back to the screen share. Switching back to the screen share, I have our Hangout app. This is a web app version, so this will be iframe from my App Engine domain. And for anybody who's built a Hangout app before, you'll recognize the hangouts.js. In the iframe technique, we have to include an RPC library, and then we include the Google JavaScript API library. That's this one right here. And that it will be familiar if you've used things like maps and other APIs that are JavaScript-based. Then from here on out, actually, let me switch the syntax over just to make it a little bit more. There we go. From here on out, we're just going to do a basic XHR request, pass in name, description, and price. And here's where the actual payment happens. On the response to that XHR, I call the goog.payments.inapp.by, and I pass in the data, which is just the JSON web token, and any success or failure event handlers. They don't really do anything interesting right now. But when all is good, this will start a purchase flow. It happens in an iframe within my application. As a developer, I don't have to worry about anything that happens here on out. If there's a success, there's a success. There's a failure, there's a failure. And there's also a postback URL that once the purchase happens, I can do additional logging. The other thing that I skipped kind of over that's important to note as well is that if you're using the Google Payments API for digital goods, you have to load the library with that JSON API, and I do a google.load. This is all documented in the Getting Started guide, but the important thing to note here is I'm actually running in the sandbox config. So when I'm running in the sandbox config, it's a very useful feature because none of the credit card transactions will actually really be charged. So I can keep on testing, tweaking, and doing more development without actually charging myself or doing $1 transactions, which would be the case if we didn't have the sandbox environment. And when you're ready to go to production, you literally just change the package to production, and now you can accept payments with real credit card numbers.
Sorry, John.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah.
Now that we've actually seen some of the code, I'm going to try to see if I can do a screen share of that sample app that's actually running today. So let me screen share the Hangout. This might have a Hall of Mirrors effect. I don't know. I don't know yet.
Let's see.
Can you see the application?
Yes, if you can zoom in a little bit.
Yeah, doing that right now. So name, description, price. Those are the parameters that I was passing into the AJAX request. I'm selling a slicer dicer, which is the best salsa maker on the planet. This AJAX purchase is going to initiate the buy method, and we'll see if that successfully loads. So now from here on out, the developer doesn't have to worry about anything. This is the Google Wallet doing its thing. I actually have a test credit card, so you don't even have to use your own credit cards. Google provides you with an Amex, MasterCard, and a Visa, I think. So in Sandbox, you can just keep on trying with that. So it's completely sandbox. Go ahead and press buy. The flow continues. Make sure that my Wi-Fi isn't. And guess what? The purchase has just been successful, and I'll probably see a success method if I look in the console. I don't know if you can see the console, but payment was successful. There's some weirdness going on with the Hangout, but
so that,
at this point.
So Jonathan, just to clarify what's going on here, you've got a Sandbox account running this. You've got a Sandbox account for Google Wallet as well as for the Hangout, and so all of these transactions that you're doing are kind of just nulls.
Exactly. And so it actually gets recorded in the Sandbox log, so you can see what's transpiring, but there's no real money being charged or any fees being levied. So you can just keep on testing in Sandbox, and if once you go to production, you might want to have a build that is the production build that takes currency, and then in your dev environment, keep that Sandbox build for additional testing and purchases and things like that.
Cool. So if you wanted other people to test inside of your Sandbox, what would they have to do? Would you just be able to share out your app like you would any other Sandbox app, and then?
Exactly. If I send this to you guys, you can go ahead and purchase that. I'd recommend you using a test credit card, but of course it's in the Sandbox, so even a production one won't be charged. But as long as you have access to my application, you can test this. So it's really neat for other developers when they're working together, or if you're doing Q&A.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, I think that covers it. And you saw that code was pretty straightforward. The documentation was super helpful. We'll provide in the show notes links to the sample code, because we'll be publishing this probably tomorrow morning with the App Engine project. Test credit cards, how to get your sell-in information, and of course the commerce documentation, the digital goods documentation is already up, and we'll link to all that afterwards.
Great. So what we're seeing is just a real simple example of how to use Google Wallet APIs from within a Hangout app. And so, Jonathan, we'll make sure that we include the link to the sample code with the video, so that people can download it, play with it, experiment, and then we'll kind of have a little starter project for other developers out there. So I guess what would be interesting now would be if anyone has any questions, just to make sure that you ask them in the event, and we're monitoring that. And so Alan just asked, are there any best practices for determining what products a person has purchased to make them available in Hangout apps?
So let me think more about that question. I skipped over the JOT pretty quickly, but let's see if I can go back to it. There is a section in the JOT that's called seller data.
So can you move that? Can you actually expand it a little bit more? I can't. We're having trouble seeing it.
Let me know if this is good. Looks good?
Maybe a little bit bigger.
Okay. It's not very interesting what I'm trying to show you, but there's a field called seller data. And that's just one of the attributes on the JSON that gets encoded in the JOT, and that's where you want to put some additional tracking information. So if you are trying to figure out what part of your application it's being come from, let's say you have different applications, both in a Hangout and on the web, you'd probably want to stick that in there so that purchase gets tied to whatever that metadata is there. In terms of figuring out what to sell, you'd probably want to think about creating your own recommendation engine. There are, of course, plenty of e-commerce solutions for recommending products. Your mileage may vary. I know a bunch that I could recommend because I've worked with a lot of them. But to figure out what to sell is going to come the bread and butter of your application engine.
Thanks, Jonathan. So also, kind of, what are the type of scenarios that we really expect, or what have people really been excited about doing with kind of in-app payments?
Sure, that's a great question. So the traditional, I'm buying something within an application makes sense. Think about games, power-ups, levels, customization for your characters. Those are pretty obvious. If you think of buying new games within games, so if you have sort of casual games like checkers and chess, and if you want to buy a Chinese backgammon or something like that, that's also totally within the realms of what in-app payments do. But other scenarios, which are pretty interesting, if you want to do something like a freemium model, where you can provide a level of your service. So if it's not even a game, let's say it's a productivity app, and you want to say, 1 gig of storage is free. Additional storage, you can use in-app payments to buy that as a one-time fee. But the other piece that we didn't actually go over is the introduction of subscription billing. So I believe at Google I/O we announced the ability to do subscription-based billing. So if you're doing a service, maybe you're doing a subscription for lessons inside of a Hangout. So something like a cooking class or education where they load the application before they can start, you check whether they have a subscription. Otherwise, you do some sort of prompt to subscribe. That's really interesting, and I think people will definitely start exploring that as soon as they can.
Cool, that's pretty exciting. I guess kind of another question would be, so we talked a little bit about best practices. What about kind of security considerations? How do we know that the information that's being shared in the Hangout, because it's a JavaScript app in an iframe, right? Mm-hmm. How do we know that the various credentials are secure, and what are kind of some of the key security measures that are kind of being demonstrated in this sample?
That's also a great question. The JSON Web Token is sort of core to what's making in-app payments, or digital goods rather, secure, because it is using a seller secret and sort of hashing that JSON. It's hard to decrypt it. There's also timestamps within the JSON Web Token, so when it was created and when it's going to expires, which is persisted on the server side, so it validates that as well, making it moot if somebody tries to figure out after it's expired. And the communication is done over HTTPS, right? So even if you're Hangout, or if you're using a non-Hangout app and it's over HTTP, the purchase is in an iframe and it's secured. So we do our best attempt to making it a foolproof system. But you can rest assured that there's all the industry controls around making a secure payment system. We fall under those.
Great, thank you, Jonathan. Alan actually has a question, and he's asking, in the context of items to be purchased and used inside of the Hangout itself, let's say that he has a game inside a Hangout. What's the best way to determine? Actually, it looks like kind of what's the best way to determine what items they have purchased, and then if they want to use them in a game later, kind of what's the way to sort of synchronize across that? What he suggested actually is using the user's ID, storing it on the server, and then using that to look up which items they own, and then bringing it back later.
That you took the words right out of my mouth.
Okay, cool.
There's in the context of a Hangout, we've talked about this in former Hangouts office hours about there's the Google Plus ID, there's a Hangout ID, and then there's the participant ID. They're all different. They're all unique. In the context of this, the most absolute unique way of identifying a user on Google Plus inside of a Hangout is to use their Google Plus their ID. Right? That's found in the long URL when you go to their profile. Go ahead, use that as the key. That's guaranteed and secure, and we're not going to be changing that. So that's valid. And App Engine has a great backend for doing large types of tables and BigQuery for big queries. So if you have a huge application, you can easily troll through all those by looking at the item ID compared to a user ID. So, right, that's the right way.
Cool, great. Thanks for that suggestion. And I guess I'm not seeing any questions right now. We'll hang out a little bit longer. Jonathan, actually, if you could talk for a moment about, scenarios other than games, specifically kind of people are interested in doing things like accepting donations through Hangouts, and what also about kind of pay-per-view content, so featured speakers and so forth.
Yeah. So donations work the same way as an in-app payment. We don't have a particular API dedicated to donations, but as you can imagine, because our split with the developers is so fair, it's better than a lot of the donation services out there. So you would treat that as, I want to donate $5 to this cause. You would do that with the digital goods. In terms of non-game scenarios, I think the freemium model is the right place to talk about this, especially when you're talking about productivity software. So if I have 1 user in the system or 5 users in the system, that's free. If it's like a Kanban board or a sprint planning board. And if I add additional users, I'd have to buy additional seats. And you can do that as a one-time purchase, or you can do that as recurring billing. And then if you want to piecemeal your product. So I have something where you can do just the sprint board for free, but if you want to have real-time chat with logging, you have to pay an additional $100 a year or something like that. That's also a great scenario to do that. I think the premium content is very interesting, and I definitely like that model because you have full control over the application that's running in a Hangout, and for somebody to do sort of a paywall or subscription-based content viewing, the app lets you have full control over that. The digital goods make it accessible and monetizable. The one area that gets tricky is if you want to do that over Hangouts on Air, because the Hangouts on Air is not restricted to the app. The Hangouts on Air can run on YouTube.com, it can run on Google Plus Stream, and it can run anywhere you embed that YouTube feed. So if you're looking to sort of control streaming content or even just static content on an HOA setting, then you can't use digital goods. Now you can prevent that functionality. So within our API, you can detect if somebody's broadcasting, and that's something that we'll be exploring further to make that even easier. And then you could say, hey, you're broadcasting this premium content. We're going to stop the feed until you stop the Hangouts on Air. And that's probably the best solution for anybody who's looking to do premium content in a Hangout using digital goods to monetize it.
Cool. So another question's come up. What if you have a limited set of products? So let's say that you've got like a special edition item, and it'll be sold from within a Hangout until there's 0 left. You start with 10, and then it kind of decrements. Is this possible using the Wallet API, or would you kind of have to use your own kind of implementation on the back end?
So inventory management is not done by Google Wallet. The Payments API is the quick and easy way to make purchases and subscriptions. For doing inventory, you're going to have to build an inventory system or look towards other systems that are out there for inventory. A simple scenario, you wouldn't need a full e-commerce backend. I've worked with a bunch of them in the past. Sometimes they're overhead that you don't need. If you just want to have 10 items or X items and decrement them, I would just do a simple App Engine project. Have one of our data store or even BigQuery, depending on what you're looking at, and then use something like AJAX to decrement each purchase. It's actually very easy code, but the wallet won't do that for you.
Yep. So you won't get the transaction APIs for that just from Wallet. So there's another question, and I really wish we had one of the Wallet guys here because they'd totally be able to cover this stuff. But do you happen to know what the limits are? What's the minimum and maximum for Wallet API, for Wallet API payments?
So is that price, or is that?
Is it? I mean, can you say like? I mean, I know that particularly in app stores, you will see this app that like the minimum payment is like $1.
I don't know off the top of my head. There is. I can talk to you a little bit about the pricing model because we've actually introduced a new pricing model at I/O that it's pretty favorable for developers. So when in-app payments launched last year or so, we had a flat 5% fee across whatever your transaction was, which was very competitive compared to other products, which made it very desirable. Recently, we introduced a new payment structure, a secondary payment structure, which is, I want to say, 30 cents plus 1.9% off the total purchase. And the beauty of...
Well, what just happened?
As long as it's a measurable amount. But yeah, we'll have to follow up with the payments guys to figure that one out.
Cool. So it looks like we're not seeing too many more questions right now. We'll wait a minute or two. We had some minor technical difficulties just recently with the Hangout. But yeah, we should be good. Yeah.
Well, Gus, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
You asked me so many. What's the first use that you want to see with digital goods?
I mean, certainly something that is really fun is kind of the notion of real money, like real money within games. I think it'd be interesting to see things like, like actual item purchases and other exciting things for people who are actually creating games. I would really expect that to be the first and most critical kind of use of payments within apps.
Yeah, definitely. We have a strong user base of developers who are interested in games and Hangouts, and it's obvious why there's a happy marriage there. It's social, it's real time, it's fun, and I think we're going to see a lot of adoption from the games folks, bringing their Hangout games, making them monetizable.
Yeah. I think it also is going to mean probably more people looking at the Hangouts API and looking at Hangouts for the kinds of games that they can create.
Yeah, definitely, and it's not just game developers, and it's not just productivity and sort of traditional app developers that we're getting interest from. Brands and marketing companies and agencies are all saying, "Hey, this is a great opportunity to build an interactive art piece or web app that brands can actually get in front of the eyeballs of their consumers." And then, of course, if you have a monetizable piece to that, that's awesome, right? It's really hard to get ROI on a marketing campaign, but if you build a Hangout app, which it's pretty easy to do, and make it fun and compelling, people could pony up for it.
Yep, and we've definitely heard some success stories about charities with getting really good engagement from within Hangouts, mm-hmm. and maybe supporting a donation model within their Hangout apps and stuff could give them direct revenue from within apps. So that's kind of a cool scenario for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And there's just a lot of traditional Hangouts that are high profile, low profile, crazy things going on in Hangouts that
mm-hmm.
can be enhanced with the use of Hangout apps. And what was the one I saw recently? There was LA Robotics Club was doing a hackathon just the other day. Maybe I think it's still going on today. People were building together and hacking and building crazy robots. But now imagine if you could somehow turn that around and do a hack for good kind of experience, right? It's not necessarily a application or a game that you engage with, but maybe you donate to a particular team so they can get more stuff, and part of that revenue goes to a foundation, or whoever wins gets a pod and the remainder goes to the foundation. So this is not a web app, this is not a game, but this is using Hangouts to connect people, and also the digital goods to sort of bring monetization opportunities.
Great. So it looks like the conversation has quieted down a bit, and I think we're just about ready to wrap up, Jonathan. Thanks everyone for watching. It's been a fun Hangout today, and keep an eye out for Google Plus Office Hours in the future. Jonathan, anything last to say?
Just thanks a lot. If you have any questions about Hangouts and Hangout apps, or even digital goods, feel feel free to plus mention us on Google Plus, and of course, if you can connect you if you have further questions about the commerce APIs.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Have a good week, and join us again for office hours probably next week.